Gav here with another episode of the Bowman Show. Today, I got a good one for you. It's an interview with Dr. Zimbardo with the Stanford Prison Study. I think you're going to enjoy this one just because it's getting into ethics and research and how you should not perform a psychological experiment. Dr. Zimbardo, thank you for joining the podcast today. I really appreciate you coming on.
Well, thank you for having me, Mr. Bowman.
Yeah. So we're talking about research in psychology right now, and we're getting into experiments, and I know you're probably going to down me on this one, but ethics and research.
Uh-huh.
And I thought you were probably the best fitting to interview for this topic.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I can talk specifically about my study, and then obviously the ethical violations associated with that, and why we can't perform a study like that anymore. But if you'd like me to start at the beginning and talk about the study first, I can do that.
Yeah, of course, that would be great. And you know what? I think you're taking it a lot better than what I thought you would.
No, obviously times are different, so the APA, American Psychological Association, obviously has standards in place now, and ethical standards, and a lot of those standards were in place too when the study was done, but it was a little bit different during that time. But anyways, yeah, we can start at the beginning if you like.
That would be awesome. Thanks a lot.
Yep, sure. Well, the brainchild of my study, obviously, I was working at Stanford University, doing research at Stanford University. Kind of came from a good friend of mine's study that happened 2 years prior to the Stanford study. His name was Stanley Milgram. So Milgram's famous obedience study with the shocks. He conducted that experiment to see how individuals, would conform to an authority figure and how far they would go with that authority figure giving them orders and also being present within the room. And they were using a shock machine to see how many volts they would give to an individual. And the results from that were quite shocking.
What do you say?
Obviously,
sounds very electrifying.
It does, and it was not literally, but and obviously I have a connection with Dr. Milgram because he was in my class and went to the same high school that I did, so we had a little bit of a relationship there.
Holy cow, you guys might as well just be best friends.
Exactly. And after, reviewing the results of his study and the findings of his study, that a large portion, I think it was around 75 to 80% of the participants in his study were willing to cross the threshold in terms of shocking someone and actually harming them, even though they knew that they were doing something wrong. The authority figure being present kind of forced them, I shouldn't say forced them, but assured them that it was okay to do that. And what I was looking for in the prison study was not necessarily how people conform to authority, but how people conform to a specific role.
Okay.
So obviously we take on multiple roles in our lives, whether that would be as a father, a son, a daughter, a student, a teacher, whatever it may be, and the obligations assigned with those roles change. The norms assigned with those roles change, and sometimes even the values with those roles change too. And what I was looking to study was how assuming a different role, and in the case of the prison study, how assuming the role of a prison guard or a prisoner could possibly change the behavior of the individual assuming that role, and if that individual, specifically in the case of the prison guards, if they would abuse their power associated with that role.
Okay, okay. So you're trying to see how these people, these subjects, if you will, how they would react and how they would try to experience their role to a point where it might be abusive, it might be accepting orders, it might be to a point where you're trying to refuse orders, depending where you're located, obviously, as your job title or your title in the prison, right?
Yeah, exactly. So what we did is we put an ad in the paper, and people obviously applied for the study, and it was mainly college students. It was all males, no females.
Huh.
Um, and what we did once we vetted them, to make sure that there wasn't any underlying psychological concerns or psychological issues, um, of the participants before the study started. We randomly assigned them to groups, whether it be the guard group or the prisoner group. And once we had established that, we had originally planned to run the experiment for 2 weeks.
Okay.
Um, we wanted to run it as much like a prison as we possibly could. Now we ran into a little bit of problems at the beginning with the guards and actually knowing what to do and how to carry out their roles. So we had some that were willing to do what they were supposed to do to the prisoners, act in the part of a guard, and we had some that were kind of just there to collect the paycheck of being a part of the study and stuff. So
I got you.
we had
So
to
they're
take,
just floating
yeah,
through it,
we had,
right?
yeah, we had to take on more of a role. So I became the superintendent of the prison, and one of my colleagues became the warden. And we kind of gave them ideas of what to do and how to handle the prisoners and in certain situations and stuff like that. Trying not to tell them to behave a certain way, but how to conduct themselves.
I got you. So it was to the point where you replicated a prison exactly the way it's it's established, right? Exactly the way it's experienced for many people, right?
Yeah, because you think of a prison, you're stripped of your identity.
Yeah.
Uh, a lot of cases, you're not necessarily treated as a human being, and that's what we were trying to do. We were trying to see, um, once you assume that role of prisoner, do you lose your identity of the individual you were before you came to prison?
Oh,
And we seen that in our study, where the prisoners truly believed that they were a prisoner of Stanford Prison, which was completely made up,
yeah.
to the point where they were literally referring to themselves as their prison number rather than their own name.
Wow. So you're like dehumanizing these college kids, right?
Exactly. So we're dehumanizing them. They're accepting that role of prisoner to the point where they actually believe that they did something wrong to be in that prison, and they weren't getting out of that prison, even though they could leave at any time. And the
Wow.
guards themselves, once they realized they had power over these prisoners and they had that position of authority, became more and more and more sadistic towards the prisoners and forcing them to do things that would be considered inhumane or unethical. Um, and that's one of the main reasons why a study like this cannot be conducted, again, because there was psychological harm associated with this study. The prisoners did suffer psychologically um, during this study. Now, we did conduct some exit interviews and some surveys and stuff and debriefings afterwards, and uh, there was no, or at least we concluded that there was no long-lasting psychological damage done to them. But there's no doubt that they did suffer psychologically while they were in that prison. Once the guards realized the authority they had over them, became more and more sadistic.
I mean, let's face it. If you're a college kid, you see that ad in the paper, and this happened when in the 1970s, right?
Yes, early 70s.
Early 70s. Okay. Yeah, you see this ad in the paper, you're going to get paid to really just act like a prisoner or a prison guard. And let's face it, I mean, these kids that never held an authoritative position, once they're given this authority, they kind of act in a way that is extremely harsh to many of these prisoners. And I don't know. It's to the point where I've read a little bit about your study, and it just got a little out of hand.
And what's interesting about it too, because we did vet them, like I said beforehand, and we kind of asked them, what would you rather be, a prisoner or a guard? And you have to keep in mind the context and the culture and the norms and values of that time period.
Okay.
So late 60s, early 70s, we have the end of the Vietnam War.
Yep.
We have a cultural movement.
The civil rights movement, right?
Yep. You had the civil rights movement. You had the counter-revolutionary hippie movement that was going on.
The Cold War going on, right?
Exactly. So there was a lot of protesting going on, specifically during the Vietnam War and post-Vietnam War on college campuses, and there was a lot of police activity on these college campuses, and there was a lot of violence associated with that police activity and the protests on these college campuses. So it's actually similar to today a lot, where people don't have a lot of respect, specifically college students, for police officers or people of authority.
Yeah.
So they didn't want to take on that position because those are the people that they didn't want to be like.
I got
So you would think once they become that guard, they wouldn't become sadistic because they're talking out about that and protesting against that sadism, right?
Yeah.
But
you think they try to be a little different?
But the study kind of proved that theory wrong, because they did become sadistic and act in the same manner as the police officers and other prison guards would have acted that they were protesting against. So that was another interesting aspect.
That is. I mean, in the late 60s, we can really compare that to today's world with politics and, with law enforcement and how that's always a topic of debate. And I don't know. During that time, I think it's a little bit worse than what it is today, if anybody can believe that. But it's very relative of what's happening and it's going on in the world. But that's for another conversation. And like you said, I mean, these college students, they want to try to be different. They want to try to be just in the way they try to show their authority, and it didn't show that way, right, with your study.
No, it didn't. It didn't at all, which was very interesting. And after the study was cut short only after 7 days, 6-7 days there.
Really?
When it was supposed to go 2 weeks, because it just got that out of hand.
Oh, wow.
And the behavior of the guards and the treatment of the prisoners by the guards just went too far, crossed too many lines. And to be honest with you, I probably should not have let the study go on that far, but I was so caught up in my role as superintendent, I wasn't thinking of my role as a psychologist and upholding the ethical standards of being a psychologist. And one of those is preventing any psychological or emotional harm to any participants or clients of mine. And that definitely was taking place. So I had a little bit of role conflict there.
Okay, I was just going to ask you, when do you think it just got too far as the person as a person delivering and developing this experiment? When did you realize, what, this is pushing it too much? And you pretty much stated it right there. It's just like you actually came to a point where you thought you were in a role playing situation where you were the superintendent and you had to keep this study going.
Exactly. And the reason behind that too is I'm thinking, the ramifications of this, or the data that this is going to provide and the conclusions that this is going to provide, is going to be so beneficial to understanding why we conform to authority, okay, and why we become sadistic once we're given an authority role, is too valuable to stop the study.
Yeah.
But like I said, it got to the point where it just got that out of hand that, I had to stop the study. We had to stop the study. But even with it only being those 6-7 days, we had enough data to really understand and believe and conclude that pretty much anybody is capable of, I don't want to say sadistic acts or sadism, but behaving in a manner that would be considered unethical. Okay,
I got you. So like abusive power in a
we're
way.
capable. We're capable of evil, and that's kind of a lot of what my later research focused on is what causes us to be evil. What is the science of evil?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of studies on different prisons and why prison guards and those different prisons treated prisoners badly, specifically prisons with um, criminals such as terrorists and stuff like that. And I did plenty of lectures and wrote books and journal articles on on the science of evil.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, that study itself, the Stanford prison experience, proved that pretty much anybody can become sadistic and become evil and act in an unethical manner if they're given a position of authority.
Wow. Wow. So how did this turn out then for these college kids? So after the study, obviously you said that had some effects on some of the prisoners. What about the prison guards? How did they react to it?
Uh, well, the prisoners and the prison guards, most of them believed that it was very beneficial. The study was very beneficial, and a lot of them couldn't believe uh, how far they actually went, and
Mm-hmm.
and some of the guards reported that they couldn't believe how much punishment and how much verbal abuse the prisoners actually took without lashing back at the guards. They just conformed to that role as prisoner and let them abuse them verbally um, without any confrontation or any objection whatsoever.
Wow. So they
So
like accepted it.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Hmm. That's interesting. Wow. So real quick, just because we were talking about this a lot, and this is great stuff here. What about the bare bones of the study? I just went over independent variable, dependent variable, the operational definition, and understanding hypothesis, and how that fits into scientific method. So, do you mind rolling through that with us with your study?
Yeah, to be honest with you, that's one of the main criticisms of my study is that there was no variables. There was no independent or dependent variables associated with the study itself.
Really?
Um, yes, and some of my colleagues had called me out on that, and that's one of the criticisms that it was not, or the validity of the studies in question because it wasn't controlled enough.
Hmm. Well, I'll tell you what. We still talk about your experiment today, and and to be honest, it really brings a lot of information on what exactly you're looking for, and I feel like you found that. And
Yes,
without having any variables, it's just interesting to know that you found what you're looking for.
yes, exactly. And to be honest with you, this study, at least the ramifications of the study, um, has led to a lot of positive things happening, at least recently for me and some of my colleagues. We have kind of focused our efforts on more of a positive side of human nature instead of a negative side of human nature. So for years, I was doing all these presentations on the science of evil and why we do evil things and how power corrupts and all that kind of stuff. And at one of my presentations, one of my I think it was a TED talk or something like that. Somebody had come up to me afterwards and was really impressed with what I was talking about, and I had said something about what how do we teach people to be heroes? Like, how do we teach people to do good, to have empathy for others? Because a lot of times when we do evil things, it's because we have a lack of empathy, or our empathy has been eroded in some manner or another. And
Oh, okay.
um, and somebody had brought that up to me, saying, "Hey, you should really look into this hero thing a little bit more." And now a lot of my work is just associated with that. So now what we do is we go around the world and we develop this hero project. And a lot of school districts are using it. Different countries are implementing it in different ways. We have this educational plan, educational curriculum on how to teach people to be empathetic and to be heroes, instead of focusing on the evil and bad side of human nature. And there's been a lot of success with it too. So you can say, yeah, the prison study was unethical. It did cause psychological harm during the study to the participants, but it has some positive consequences also, even though it's how many years later, where it has led to this curriculum, this hero curriculum that we have created, and trying to make a positive change in the world.
I was gonna say it totally sounded like this experiment that you had, 40, heck, even 50 years ago now, totally turned around, and you're trying to find out, what, who are the good people in the world? How can we find the good tendencies of people? And that's awesome.
Yes. Yes.
Hmm. So with that, have you found anything, or is there anything that you've detailed on? I know with Batman, it took his parents getting murdered in an alley for him to turn into this superhero.
Well,
So,
I wouldn't say I'm a Batman or anything like that, but
okay.
we've had a lot of success in implementing this new program, and I think it was Turkey. We were in Turkey recently, and Turkey's a country that's kind of known as a country that's very ethnocentric, and I don't want to use the word selfish, but they're kind of that mindset of what benefits them. They'll do whatever benefits them and not benefit. They don't have that group mentality. What's good for the group, and this program kind of promotes that a little bit, to help others and to educate others to how to help others and be kind to others. And like I said, a lot of school districts have been adopting it too here in the United States, and have been implementing our program within their curriculum and stuff, and have had success with that. So,
Awesome.
and that's kind of what I've been doing now, and I plan on continuing to do that, and try to get into as many countries around the world as possible.
That'd be awesome. That's great. I'm glad that your study that was so unethical, that's brought up in many psychological, classes, is finally turning the tide and pushing you to become a, almost like a martyr in a way of becoming
Hmm.
a better understanding of where we should move with this, right? Ethics and research.
Yeah. Yes.
Awesome. Well, hey, I really appreciate you coming on the show today. That was a great talk, and yeah, that's awesome. And I really appreciate you coming on.
All right. Yep. No problem, Mr. Bowman. Anytime.
All right. Hey, we'll see you later. Have a good one.
Yep. You too.